doctor prescribed, many therapies require titration because it isn't always a science as to knowing where you start. It's a science as to how you titrate up or down depending on initial reaction.
I spent 10 years chasing one question. I've watched specialty hubs struggle with everything. A staffing model for peak season, re-verification, real-time read on where a patient actually is in their journey, a data and operations stack that doesn't talk to itself. I've watched field reimbursement managers and doctors crave that real-time read, and I've watched nurses spend hours on the phone. Some of this still runs on a fax machine. Some time ago, I asked specialty pharma community a simple question. Can there be a tech-enabled hub where patient care is the only KPI that matters? My guest today is chasing a version of that same question. His company owns number, say 40% of patients drop off before they start the treatment. His bet isn't more AI replacing people. It's AI that hands the judgment call back to a person at the exact moment it matters. I'm Ankit Jain. This is the Hub Brief. I've spent 15 years studying pharmacy and market access at Takeda, Novartis, Merck, and Pfizer. I've watched that same fight 1,000 times, and here's their bet. They're not automating the hub, they're becoming it. Doing it start to finish. I'm excited to host Ankit Jain, CEO and co-founder of Infinitus, was building exactly that vision. All right, Ankit, good to finally have you here. I've been meaning to have this conversation for about a month, and I was talking to Sarah, and she said that you launched a new hub. Why don't you tell us more about that?
Well, thanks for this conversation. Thanks for coming by our office. This is it's exciting to talk to you. You've been in this space for a while, but also to talk about our new AI first hub. As we've thought about the business that we've been building now for 7.5 years, we've been building pieces of this puzzle. And it's really nice to finally talk about the real act one, the real part of bringing those puzzle pieces together and be able to offer to the ecosystem a full-fledged AI first hub. It's not just about benefit verifications. It isn't just about an adherence program. It isn't just about checking in on patients on how they're doing. It's really being able to stitch together the entire patient journey, because today no one's able to do that.
So I want to tack on to the patient journey. And this is one of my theses that I've been writing about, is the disconnected systems cost more to the patient's mental and emotional health than anything else in this industry, right? Yep. So tell me about, why did you pick this part to push it into AI? As a healthcare industry, we are eons behind any other industry adopting AI or any technology. We use still faxes, for crying out loud. So from your perspective, and you said there's a problem that needs solving, walk me through the initial push to get into this side of the healthcare.
Well, they always say you have to find something that's near and dear to you and something close to home. My wife's been working in the access space for a long time. Whether it was at health systems, whether it's been in pharma, but really helping patients going through probably the hardest parts of their journey, which is they've been told they have a diagnosis that they don't know what that means for their life. Right. But then getting access to the therapy that their doctor wants to get them on, making sure that someone can follow up with them, and then keeping them on that therapy, sometimes for decades, just to keep them healthy, just to keep them going so they can spend their life in a better state than they would if they didn't have access and affordability towards these therapies.
So I'm going to tell you my story.
Yeah.
So I worked with a client, a big pharma client. They came to us, and I'm talking 2018. This is ML data warehouse, big data time. And the client said, we have this brand new therapy for oncology patients. And they asked us can you draft your systems to incorporate a patient journey end to end? I looked at them and said, there's no way we can do this, because the underlying technology was so disconnected. The patient lived in so many different systems, from copay to patient access programs to even getting the benefit verification. I remember the days when we were to talk to operation guys and say, okay, how do you write your scripts to talk to the payers? Because payers just would not want to talk to you. And from those days, we've come to the position that you situated your company in. And it allows me to really be hopeful. And I hope I'm still hopeful about the future. But your press release mentions that you have 40% of patients who don't get access to therapy, or they don't even get to therapy stage. Well, can you break that number down? It's like, how does the AI get those patients back on therapy?
Well, so 40% of patients who are prescribed a therapy that require a prior authorization never get on that therapy. And there's a multiplicity of reasons. Some patients just don't have the resources or the means to follow up enough to get on that therapy. It takes too long. And there's a stat that if you can get the benefits and coverage information for a patient while they're in the office and tell them how to get on it while they're there, there is a 50 to 70% higher chance of them actually getting on that therapy. If they leave the office with the office staff telling them, we'll follow up to you in a few weeks, well, that few weeks might be never. Because there's another patient that comes in, or this patient, it's just too painful to get them on therapy. So you focus on the ones that you can get on, or the patient goes about their day and says, I know my ophthalmologist told me I need to get these injections into my eyeballs, which sounds scary, by the way, but my life is okay. Maybe I shouldn't change it. And they kind of just go about it. As humans, we get used to pain.
Yes.
Right? Whether it is emotional pain, whether it is physical pain, we always say that time solves all problems. It doesn't solve it, but we tend to get used to it. And so it's important to turn things around as early as possible so we don't just get used to it, because what we don't realize as humans is how these different injuries that we get, both mental, emotional, and physical, add up to each other.
Yes, and this literally echoes, again, I'm going to do a very shameless plug here of my blog. I simulated a journey of a 64-year-old patient who had a grandchild with a DMD diagnosis. Now, it's a pediatric indication. It's a muscle atrophy. There is no way throughout this journey that 65-year-old grandmother who has Cadillac of insurance, by the way, money's not a problem. It's the friction that causes her to be not even a single day where she's not distressed. And as a healthcare industry coming together to support that patient, not the other way around, we make promises online. You see any manufacturer, you see any payer, we help patients at heart, all these taglines, they go on for countless after hours, don't they? But not even a single month goes by where that grandmother has not been able to feel happy about her child.
So the access part is one piece of it. There's another piece which I think is very important to talk about as well. Let's say you're able to get a patient on the first dose of the therapy that their doctor prescribed. Many therapies require titration because it isn't always a science as to knowing where you start. It's a science as to how you titrate up or down depending on initial reaction.
Correct.
But if you don't have the resources to follow up with those patients and ask a simple question, how are you doing, Mrs. Jones? And the person says, oh man, I've been feeling extremely nauseous. It's been terrible. Well, that's your sign to say, well, maybe we need to change the dosage. And there's known pathways, there's known titrations up and titrations down, but you need to have that first conversation to then decide what the next step is. What happens in most cases is that you prescribe a medication, the patient gets the first dose, no one checks in on them because we assume that if things are bad enough, the patient or their caregivers or their family will pound the table.
Yeah.
But what if it's not bad enough to go to the emergency room, but it's bad enough that you go, maybe my life was better before this medication, you just stop taking it. So there's the quiet quitting that happens of prescribed therapies because the prescribers did not have the resources to really titrate the medication the right way.
And this is really about communication, the patient experience, right? I mean, if you look at any other industry, just that's not healthcare, they pride on member experience or consumer experience as their selling sign.
I don't know if I agree with that. I think we tend to, as an industry, beat up on ourselves. Are there places we can improve? Absolutely. But we're doing incredible work as well. If I order something on Amazon, no one's calling me and saying, did the shoes fit you well? Or did the clothes fit you well? No, they assume if it's not fitting you well, you will take the action to return them. Or maybe you don't and you sit with it and you have a growing pile of things that are a waste. I think the difference is in healthcare, the impact of not having that communication, not having that exchange of information can affect us not just immediately, but for a long time going forward.
Yeah. And I think part of that problem is really the provider burden, right? I mean, so
100%.
I've spoken to so many doctors throughout my journey when we wanted to introduce something new at, US Oncology or any other provider practices. And they were like, I don't want to have another workflow in my daily routine. I barely get to see 20 people in a day. And yet you're asking me to read another 15-minute dossier for every patient that comes in through the EMR EHR system, which is just not going to happen. So my question to you is, how does AI help them? Yes, I understand your consensus on building infrastructure for the patients and AI to help them out. What about the providers?
Yeah, I think we should step back and think about something that is probably not going to be too popular in the Silicon Valley types, right? We're sitting right here in Silicon Valley, and one of the common sayings is that companies like Epic are gatekeepers. They don't let anybody launch new technology into the EHR, and to no end, it pisses entrepreneurs and venture capitalists off. And you know what? I understand their point of view, but if you flip that around and you look at it from the point of view of the prescriber or office staff, you don't want new software popping up in your EHR every single day because some company decided that what they're doing is the most important thing. And your UI changes. If as I've spent more time in healthcare, I've realized that prescriber point of view, which is extremely important. They want to focus on the patient, not constantly figuring out which button is where on their UI and how new technology is being popped up at them, right? And I think that it's very important to think about that point of view. That said, I think this is an opportunity with AI for us to step back and go, what are some fundamental truths that we've not been able to acknowledge for generations? One of the fundamental truths that we've not been able to acknowledge is that we don't have the resources. If you watch the TV show Pitt, there's the hospital administrator that comes in and constantly wants to do more with less. There's the main character who says, I need more nurses, right, in order to keep your NPS high while giving the quality of care that we want. And we've had this tension for generations that we want to do better. We all want to do right by the patient, by the provider, but we don't have the resources to do so. And that fundamental truth is changing. AI is changing that because there are certain things we can now take off the plate of our overworked staff. One of them being context. AI can maintain context. Because today, our staff cannot maintain context across all the different things that need to happen, clinical and administrative, across more complicated healthcare journeys than there's ever been before. Because of the breakthroughs of science, we now want to be able to get precision medicine and all these things. But how can you remember every patient's pathway and a growing number of patients? Now, that's one piece of it. The other piece of it is there's a lot of work that we never assumed that the healthcare system could take on. If you think about someone who has a cancer diagnosis, who's told that they need to get on their first oncolytic infusion, there's nurses and other staff that will prepare them for their first infusion, but no one will check in on them after that infusion.
That's true.
Because we assume something is wrong, they'll pound the table.
Correct.
No one assumes that we need to have staff to do, because we don't have the staff. With AI, that changes.
And that comes, the nurse navigator care coordinators, they come maybe months into the journey, right? Unless it's
But they prepare you for what's next.
Correct.
They don't check in on what's last because we assume what just happened. You would have told us if something went wrong. And that fundamentally is a shift that we can have now with AI.
So I'll give you that. I'll give you that. But my question that still remains is, you either measure patient access programs, or you measure, provider offices, or you even measure, how patients feel throughout the journey. There's not even one single QBR slide that goes on patient experience.
No, because
yet we spend billions of dollars.
Well, I think we spend billions of dollars on copay assistance and patient-free drug programs, but we measure how long it takes to do a benefit verification. We measure how long it is to SP triage. And we throw our hands up and say, well, we don't have full control of the whole process. Therefore, we won't actually measure and hold ourselves accountable for what percentage of patients actually get on the therapy. We won't measure the post-therapy titration rates and actually own the end-to-end patient journey. One of the things that we pride ourselves at doing with our AI First Hub is, while we're starting with the postscript journey, we actually believe the patient journey starts way before that first script. It starts when you first feel something is off and you go to Google or ChatGPT or one of these places and saying, hey, I've been having a lot of headaches for the last week. And you start self-diagnose, or you talk to a friend, or you talk to your doctor who happens to have told you, we ran these tests and this thing came up. That's when the journey starts, because now you're going to go try to diagnose what happens with your healthcare professionals. The other interesting realization that we've had is that every entity in healthcare wants to do what's right.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason, everyone believes that the patient journey starts when they first engage the patient.
Worse, it starts for a lot of patient access programs when the enrollment form comes in.
Right. It's important to understand that there's a whole context of that patient that is way before that first point,
Correct.
right? And it's not just for patient access programs. Your patient journey doesn't start for a pharmacy when the script gets there. But it's important for that pharmacy team to understand what happened before, because we today, as consumers, as patients, are constantly giving our context to every person. We're repeating ourselves. My shellfish allergies or my mushroom allergies. Why do I have to keep repeating myself? Why can't the underlying fabric of healthcare take my context everywhere I go? That's our opportunity.
Well, that's a big opportunity, because we've been trying to do that, through the journeys, through through fax systems, through, when big data came in, we said we would revolutionize the way we get the insights. I heard a lot about your insights platform, which provides direct line of sight for doctors, for FRMs and manufacturers for that matter, into patient journey. So can you just talk more about how that really impacts the delivery of care?
Yeah. So again, we launched a product called Lens a few months ago, and our insight into the system was that every team was trying to get metrics, analytics, and insights from their narrow point of view. And what really needed to happen was, how do you bubble up and how do you get insights that affect the patient journey and affect the programs across different boundaries that exist for good or bad reason. And so when you're having, because every interaction that a program has, a patient access program has with a member, with a patient, with a provider, with a payer, is an opportunity to learn something.
Correct.
And then act on that somewhere else. If your phone calls to your payers are seeing a change in prior auth policies, well, your market access team needs to know about that, right? If your patients are increasingly complaining about the ability to get access to therapy in certain geographies, well, your sales and FRM teams for that region need to know about.
Correct.
And not 3 months later, not 6 months later, the next day, the next week. Right? If certain teams are doing an incredibly good job of getting prior authorizations approved, well, the insights from that need to go to all the teams. Right. So it's not just about negative things. It's also the things that are positive. How can we learn? How can we have that performance improvement mindset in a way that is powered by data?
And I think that's what's missing from the industry. If you look at the sort of legacy hubs across the industry, and I've worked in a few and advised a few, the conversation doesn't even, it's not even a thing of consideration when you talk to them about how you're sitting on a gold mine, not from a monetary perspective, but they're willing.
From an impact perspective.
Exactly. And they're willing to give that data off to data aggregators and create a whole bunch of infrastructure costs to get the real-time insight when they should be doing this in-house.
Well, I don't think every company is made to do every job, right? The legacy hub was built as a BPO.
Yes.
They were built to staff, train, and do the same work over and over again. That is not an insights organization.
Yes.
That is not a performance improvement organization. And I can tell you that is not a technology organization.
They claim to be a technology organization. I mean, that's how they sell a new business to manufacturers.
That's how they used to. They used to be the only option for technology a few years ago. But with the technology companies now offering CRMs, now offering platforms on top of which you can build it, the manufacturers are getting wise and saying, let's use the technology companies for technology and the hubs, the traditional hubs, as BPOs when technology can't do it.
Question about that, but we'll get to the insource outsource model. But just to have a conversation about this, I was talking to a friend of mine who works in a hub, and I asked him a point blank question. It's like, what is your moat? How do you differentiate from any other? And I give example of your company and a few others. And he said, he thought about it for a second. He owns a technology stack, by the way. And he goes, probably our CRM, because it's white glove. I'm like, that's not a moat anymore. I can create a CRM using cloud coding. I mean, I can't, I'm not an engineer, but it's not a moat anymore. Why do you still believe that a white glove service is a moat? Because I understand, I mean, working in rare medicine needs a white glove service. However, the technology stack needs to extend beyond how your operations uses it to how it impacts the patients, gives the insights to the decision makers to redraft their SOPs or work instructions if that matter.
I think there's many layers to this. I think the technology of tomorrow is very different than the technology of yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
The technology of yesterday was about looking at the task at hand and helping a human get it done and document it, right?
I remember those days, yes.
Right? You log in the morning, you have your queue of work to be done, you do one, you document it, you move on to the next one, right? It is a simple database.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just saving it and it shows you the journey of every patient, but somebody else comes in and assigns you the work.
Yeah.
And you are able to do what the people drive the system to do. The technology of tomorrow looks fundamentally different. The technology of tomorrow creates the work queues for you based on what's happening 24/7, 365. So it doesn't start at 9 a.m. and end at 5 p.m. It's when the patient needs help, they should be able to get help self-serve or through a team. The technology of tomorrow gives context so that when you start working, you are not starting from zero. You're not spending an hour in a very rare drug scenario doing all the research to figure out what that patient has been through. That patient journey is handed to you and the specific next step is asked of you to do. And the third thing that the technology of tomorrow does is every time that human action happens, which is incredibly important, that human touch is going to be more needed in the tomorrow than in the yesterday because of the kinds of drugs, the kinds of diseases that we have. But it makes sure that that context is stored, the insights are generated so that the next interaction feels like a continuation rather than a restart. Today's technology that most hubs have make every interaction feel like a lonely island.
So that and I can corroborate that with evidence from the field. Before this podcast, I actually spoke to a few of my people that I know from operations days. And one of the questions they wanted to ask to you, I was like, can you tell me one question to Ankit? It's like, how does it help me? And how does it help me in re-verification or blizzard season? We talked about this briefly a week ago. Give me your sort of overview of the blizzard season and how you first saw it and versus how you decided to use technology to change it.
Blizzard season or re-verification season is something that I had no idea about before we started Infinitus. But if you're on a specialty therapy or you're on any therapy, most consumers in the United States, their insurance is on a calendar year basis. And so when January 1st happens, your plan might change, right? You might have a different copay, a different co-insurance, different prior authorization requirements. You might not have coverage for a drug that you've been on for a decade. And if you are one of a few different entities in healthcare, this really affects you. Right. If you're a doctor or a doctor's office, you want to make sure that your patients have continuity of care, continuity of drug coverage. And if the drug you've been on is no longer covered, is there an alternative that you can be moved to? If you're a pharmacy that ships out this medication, you want to make sure you'll be paid for it.
Yeah.
Because the worst thing you can do is ship out a $75,000 medication and then find out when you claim the money, sorry, this wasn't covered.
Correct.
If you're a patient support program, whether a patient is eligible for free drug or copay assistance can change, and the amount of copay assistance can change. And so on January 1st, or the first working day thereafter, there is a flurry of information that happens, a flurry of work that happens to re-verify the benefits for all the patients in the ecosystem. For pharma, that is all the patients enrolled in their programs. For specialty pharmacies, it's all the patients that have to get the next refill. There's a lot of work that happens. And this causes chaos. This causes chaos for all of these groups because they're hiring people. Historically, they've been hiring people starting in September so that they can train them in October and November, do side-by-sides and shadowing in December. So they can do 3 weeks of work before the season's over.
Yeah.
And if you're on the payer side, this is a really painful thing as well because your usage goes up as well. You start getting a lot more phone calls. So the question we asked ourselves 7 years ago was, is there a way to unlock time with existing staff so that Blizzard doesn't have to be such a pain?
That's a tall thing.
Right? And we've had programs that scale up 20x, 50x compared to steady state in
Mhm.
Blizzard, and do so
Yeah.
with minimal staff augmentation. And the reason we've been able to do that is a combination of three things. One, if we can get the data digitally, we get the data digitally.
How does that happen?
Well, a lot of payers and a lot of PBMs increasingly have data that comes over APIs. But if you are a BPO, you get paid for full-time employees. So if there was data available, like say that you're looking for it so that on the RFP you can check the box, but you lose FTEs, you make less money. And so you slow roll that. Your incentives aren't aligned. So that's one, electronic data. Now you can't get all the data electronically all the time. We get about 25% of our cases completely electronically.
Wow.
Which means two things. One, you don't need to make a phone call.
Mhm.
But two, on January 1st, we can re-verify 25%, if not more, depending on patient population
Mhm.
and depending on kind of drug. In some cases, up to 60%, but on average, 25% of patients, we re-verify their benefits on January 1st,
Wow.
which is amazing. Now you go to the next set of patients who you can get some data electronically, but you still need to make a phone call. So we have an AI agent that makes a phone call. The AI talks to the human on the other side and gets only the pieces of data that weren't available digitally.
Yeah.
So one, the calls are shorter. The payers love it. The payers go, hey, when the humans call in, they ask for everything.
So walk me through this. Like, would you envision a world where AI is talking to AI from PSP is talking to AI?
We'll get to there in a second. But let me finish the first part
Yeah.
here. So, and then the third one, there's some payers or PBMs that refuse to talk to AIs.
Yeah.
Right? For a number of reasons. I think there's a lot of bad actors in the ecosystem, and we haven't figured out how to, separate the wheat from the chaff. And so there's some payers and PBMs say, while we figure this out, we're not going to talk to AI, in which case our humans make the phone call. So in our AI first hub, we have an operations team that we offer our customers, and we have been for the last few years, but we have AI go through the IVR. We have AI wait on hold. So our humans aren't ever waiting on hold. The humans that then get on the phone call don't ask all the questions. They only ask the questions that we couldn't get answered digitally. So they're way more efficient than the traditional hub teams. But that's not where the task ends. You have the phone call. The AI is documenting everything, regardless of who's making the conversation, who's having the conversation, the AI or the human. We have another set of AI agents that are doing QA on 100% of calls, which is unlike any traditional.
That goes across the board.
Across the board, right? So in a traditional hub, you audit 3 to 5% of interactions.
Correct.
We audit 100% of interactions. So
And
the quality,
you feed it
higher.
back to the quality.
100%.
Wow.
Right? So that makes the quality higher. We've had multiple manufacturers measure our quality against traditional hubs that they rated extremely highly, and we're 10 to 15% higher quality than their existing hub.
Absolutely.
So that's the second part. Now, to your question, do you see a future where it's AI talking to AI? So because of our volume of phone calls, we've done over 350 million interactions, our AI interacting with a human on the other side. Many of the big payers have come to us and said, can we use your technology to pick up the phone call?
That's interesting.
And we're working with a number of them on building these things out. But our philosophy is that we should not have two AIs talk to each other in English. Two pieces of technology talk to each other in English. The second you've got the data from two sides, that should be an API. So where we can get the data digitally from our payer partners or our PBM partners, that becomes an instantaneous data exchange. Part of that first step.
So you would rather cannibalize AI to AI call over an API call. That's a very strong statement because
we don't charge for minutes. Unlike every other voice AI company in the world, we are not a voice AI company. That is, voice AI is a piece of technology. We are trying to improve the patient journey. We charge for outcomes. We don't charge for time.
Well, that's a utopia for me because, again, I've been burnt. I've looked at the leaders, multi-million-dollar corporations, trying to push them. Of course, I understand the carrot and the stick. We just don't have the right incentives. What does it take for an AI-enabled tech-first hub to implement a patient support program?
Takes the right incentives. You have to be aligned with the patient journey. You have to be aligned to know that you're getting paid for the outcome, not for work being done. And this is something that healthcare, more than any other industry, understands. We're making a giant shift across healthcare from fee for service to value-based care. And value-based care is all about paying for outcomes.
Value-based care is a very abstract term. Again,
it's a very abstract term, but in our little way at Infinitus, we pay for outcomes. We don't pay for work being done. If we ever charge for work being done, it is for an initial period in order to measure the right outcomes and get the two organizations to understand. Value-based pricing is outcomes-based pricing. It is making sure that you're not paying for a benefit. Like today, we charge for a completed benefit verification.
Yeah.
But what you want to charge for is getting a patient on therapy, on a prescribed therapy in X number of days. And you should have positive kickers for cutting that time down. And you should have penalties for taking longer.
Yeah.
Right? That is the outcome that matters.
Yeah.
Or you should charge for patient, their NPS scores and their satisfaction scores.
Yeah.
And the higher they are, the more you get paid. The lower they are, the less you get paid.
Yeah.
That's the kind of alignment that we want in the industry.
Yeah. So now I want to pivot back to, I'm so stuck at Blizzard in my head because I remember going into the war rooms in every November, we would, plan out from technology to operations to marketing to mail rooms even, the guys would come in and say, how many letters are going out, right? From that perspective, you're saying the quality of the calls are stable, right? Across the board.
Yep.
But at the same time, there has to be some exceptions, and higher volume means higher exceptions. Wouldn't that mean more
so I think there's a couple of things. One, higher volume on both sides, the group calling in and the group receiving the call means that there's more ability to have errors. But if you have AI checking everything in real time, you can control a lot of those variables. The most common error we see, or the most common place for issues that we see, is the person on the other side is a temporary worker, a seasonal worker as well. They don't really understand specialty medications. You ask about a copay or coinsurance or prior authorization, or I'm sorry to ask, step edit. And they're like, what is a step edit? Right? And you have to explain it to them. Or if they give you the information and it doesn't seem right, the best human agents will say, can you check that again? Normally this plan requires prior auth. You're telling me it does not require prior auth? Has the plan changed? Can you confirm that? Our AI can now do that. Or our AI can enable the human making those phone calls to do that, in real time. And that's really powerful. By the way, there's another piece of this, which is when you are hiring those seasonal employees, or when you're hiring folks to do this work, how do you train them?
Well, you put them in a training room and then you spend millions of dollars training them.
Correct. Millions of dollars paid for by pharma.
Yeah.
Well, we've built AI to train people. So our folks, before they go live, they practiced against an AI that is constantly judging them, giving them feedback and saying, try that again, going through every corner case that our system has seen over years and years. So we use AI for training. We use AI for making sure that the training, by the way, is for the specific program based on the program specific SOPs. Then that same AI can be used for quality and
let's talk about the insourcing and outsourcing more. I think you alluded to about how manufacturers are bringing a lot of that patient experience in-house. And this is what I keep telling my friends in the business is there are going to be two types of, either you're going to outsource the entire hub market to, the legacy hubs who are going to be looking at high volume patient, high patient volumes, or you're going to look for, this boutique in-house where you can control the technology stack, you can control the outcomes of that patient experience. So walk me through your analysis and conversation.
I don't know if I agree with that positioning. Some of the most successful insourced patient experience groups are for the highest volume drugs.
That's interesting.
Look at Lilly Direct. That is right. Look at 3 of the 4 ophthalmology manufacturers that are highest volume. They've all insourced it. So what used to be the case where when you had something very boutique, you had it insourced. If it was high volume, you outsourced it. That's been flipped on its head. And the reason it's been flipped on its head is the patient experience and the patient journey doesn't start at script. And what used to be a boutique industry, I still remember when we first started this company, I met a leader of a hub and he said, Ankit, how did you hear about this little niche of healthcare, right? There's 10 players. Like, why do you, person who's done all these things in Silicon Valley want to come after this little niche? And my answer to him was, this little niche is the one point in pharma that has been directly touching patients and caregivers and providers and payers on the commercial side.
Yeah.
That's the only part. As we're doing direct to consumer more, the entire commercial org wants to have a way to contact and be contacted. And where do they turn to? They turn to the patient support or patient access program and go, tell us your learnings, tell us about your infrastructure, so we can now think about a commercial team transformation. So what used to be a business owner of PSP or PAP making a decision to outsource is now the commercial CIO saying, what is our technology infrastructure?
That's interesting switch in perspectives.
Correct. And that buyer, that CIO, is not even considering the legacy hubs, because they go, these people don't know technology. These people think like BPOs, and their incentives are not aligned with our commercial organization. That's where Infinitus comes in. We can be on top of whichever CRM you choose, Salesforce or Viva or something built in-house. Or if you have multiple, we have the agentic layer and we've got the human backing to the AI first hub where needed, so that the commercial CIO and the business owners can go, we can optimize for business outcomes. We're paying for outcomes, not for work and not for butts and seats. And we're designing for the future. So where we used to build AI agents to do benefit verifications or prior authorization status checks, we now have agentic voicemail. We now have agentic sales agents to check in with the provider groups. We have agentic MSLs that are AI first, human MSL back, which are allowing commercial teams to think about how you can redesign the engagement with tier 2 and tier 3 HCPs, who, by the way, never got love.
Right. I agree.
So going back to what we first talked about, it's not just about replacing work that happens today. It's about coming up with capacity that didn't exist in the past. The commercial org of the past, the sales teams, the FRMs were focused on tier 1 HCPs. Tier 2 and tier 3 was when they banged the table. Now you can have an answer for everybody.
That's the reason I'm speechless about this is because I hear you and I see my experience in this field is totally different. So you're selling me an idea which makes sense, backed by technology, backed by data, publicly available data. Yet when I see it happening across the board with legacy hubs, with incentives, we've already carved that out, that incentive isn't there. Why isn't it catching on?
It is. We are supporting 8 of the top 10 manufacturers, 15 of the top 20.
I could give you a high five right.
The reality is that the legacy hub model is dead. The legacy hubs.
That's a lot of people.
The legacy hubs have no idea how to keep up with this. They're patching on AI. They are trying to keep up in RFP. But what they don't realize is they're not competing with hubs. They're competing with technology companies. The decision maker has changed. The person who was making decisions for the last 30 years is one input into the commercial transformation.
That's true. And I kid you not, I was having a conversation, again, experience, with a friend of mine who works as a in technology for a legacy hub. And they were talking about how to get a manufacturer move over from another vendor. That conversation, just hearing it was painful. I was like, we live in an age where data is a commodity and you are still looking at flat files to be exchanged to convert a patient experience, and not forget about patient. There's not even a terminology as a patient experience, but they're still looking at the legacy infrastructure as the next best thing.
What's fascinating about this is that recently we were migrating a program over from a legacy hub into one that we're supporting. In this case, the manufacturer is moving into owning the CRM, and they asked us, how do we get the data from the legacy hub into our system?
That's an important question.
Right?
Yeah,
and it's in order to have continuity of care for patients, continuity of experience for HCPs. And there's 3 things that I learned from it. The first one, it's important that the manufacturer own the data, because for years, when you moved from hub A to hub B, there was this data migration. You lost data, and you always blamed the old hub. It's easy. They were an easy punching bag to say, well, that old hub was terrible. We've now moved to something new. So that's one. You should never have that again. You should be able to move between vendors, whether people vendors or technology vendors, without making the patient experience worse. So step one, own your own CRM. That's one. A second piece is make sure any technology you invest in has technology first ways to put data in and get data out. Because where data is lost is when there isn't a good way to get data out.
Correct.
As we were transitioning from this legacy hub, they said, well, we can set up an SFTP for you.
That's what I've done for the last 15 years.
We will put in a bunch of flat files that then your team can type up into the CRM. And we go,
the reason
but they had an alternative. The alternative was to, and God bless this team. They said, you can send us your forward deployed engineers who you say are good, but we will charge you $500,000 to $1 million to access our systems to technology will first take this data out.
Oh my
God.
God.
It's terrible that that's the mentality. It's terrible that it's okay for them to ask for this money to just keep patients on therapy. They want to hold on to every dollar they can as they're slowly a dying breed.
And the reason I just couldn't control my laughter, because this exact conversation I had with another same friend goes, well, why don't you use APIs? I was like, forget it. So just use APIs. Goes, you know what? It's just 250 patients. We can just like key it in. And my mind just blew up, because like that is the mentality of a CIO of a legacy hub.
Well, because a legacy hub will ask you for $500,000 or $1 million to build an API, and it'll be, 3 quarters out, and then it becomes a project which a few people there will get promoted for. It's like, no, you shouldn't get promoted to get rid of an SFTP link.
Yes.
That's the world that we are in today. By the way, this is why the decision maker is changing to the CIO, because this piece of infrastructure is becoming incredibly important to pharma. This ownership of data, ownership of insights, and ownership of the entire patient journey is so critical to the commercial success of tens of billions of dollars of investment that it should be a C-level priority rather than a priority for someone who doesn't have the resources.
And in my mind, I've always made that connection, and then you made a very important framing that it is a technology question. So you should have technology-enabled companies leading that part of your business. And in my mind, there was another stakeholder, which is a patient experience director. So a lot of these companies, a lot of manufacturers are now employing high levels, highly paid individuals who are only there to help patients through their experiences as and when, they're part of the journey through their drug. And I believe that is the catalyst that drives the CIOs into the technology, the forward-looking technology on.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I think it depends on the kind of person you put into the patient experience seat. If you put a technology conservative person who has been in patient support for the last 25 years, putting a new title doesn't change it.
That's 98%.
72%. But
how close? I want to talk about that number because
we are coming upon more and more people that really want to change it. And the reason people want to change it, and this is what I love about healthcare. I love that if you work in healthcare technology, or in healthcare, it's not that you're solving this for somebody else. You're solving it for yourself. At some point, someone in your family or you yourself
will have to go through it.
Will have to go through this, and you'll realize how painful it is. And at that point, that is the catalyst. It's not about solving for some other patient. It's about solving for your own kid, your own parent, your own spouse, yourself. That's what drives people to want to make change, because they realize if they don't change it, no one will.
And the reason I say this is that looks like an insurmountable task is because all the people that you believe are technology enabled and technology literate, they've seen, eons and weathers change, technology change as we move from, CRM, Salesforce to big data to now this additive technology that we have. I think the transition was harsh on them to a certain extent. And they've been burned by that experience from a cost perspective, from an efficiency perspective, didn't get the benefits they were promised. So I think there is that reluctance at the patient experience level to say, you know what, I think I like the way I'm reaching out to my patients. So I like the way I'm getting the data, even though it's 3-day-old data, or an adverse events that gets 48 to 72 hours to tagged in.
I think the best thing that happens in any industry is competition. And what we're seeing in every major therapeutic area, increased competition of new drugs, new biosimilars, and new services being provided. What patient experience is today is so much richer than it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And it's going to only get richer. And amongst our customer base, and I can give you that biased point of view, there are folks that are really questioning what the role of pharma is start to finish and saying, what else can we offer? And the groups that are thinking that way are reinventing themselves. They're reinventing the role of pharma. In some cases, broadening it to saying, we will help the patient keep the context across different sites of care, across all the payers that come and go in their life, across different employers, because they realize that if you can be that patient obsessed and patient centric, it will be good for everyone.
And I think there's a more of a knowledge component to that as well, right? I mean, I was talking to a senior executive out of one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the country. And we were talking about this experience, but why shouldn't you bring the patient support program in-house? And he's a senior executive, been in the business 35 years. You know what he said to me? He said, AJ, I don't think we can do that because there is a patient privacy problem because we can't manage and own the same data. And the point is that there is so much of knowledge friction, really. This is a friction. It's not even gap of knowledge. This is a friction to adopt new technology.
The equivalent of that is we've seen over the last 7 years, different folks on different AI adoption curves. Some companies have AI review boards, some don't. Some groups, the MLR team knows how to use generative technologies for different parts of approvals, for different parts of allowing the content to be shown in generative ways, and some don't. But what it takes is a few proof points. What it takes is improving the patient journey. Right. The reality is humans make mistakes.
Yeah.
When we make phone calls, our AI makes some amount of mistakes. It is normal for any system to make mistakes. What is not okay is not to be open about it, not to have appropriate benchmarks to compare against, right? It's not, and it depends on how you measure the accuracy and what is critical versus we have something called a critical pass-through rate. We need that to be at 99.999% for certain critical things in a given conversation. On the other hand, or the same thing with compliance related pieces, but there's other parts of the conversation. It's okay if it's tuned down in order to give more naturalness, etc. The important thing for us though is to make sure that we're measuring ourselves, but we're also measuring the human teams that have existed for decades and show the buyer the difference. If you only allow perfection, you will never allow change. You have to be able to make a gradual improvement over time.
So, in the next sort of part of our podcast, I have very sort of two important areas I want to talk about, and you literally mentioned both of them in the same sentence. The first is AI governance. To control quality. What are your gates? What are your humans in the loop guardrails that you provide? Because a lot of research has gone in from mostly from clinical AI perspective, but how do you provide? I know you do a very safe warm transfer. The agent is up to date on the time as soon as AI, hands over the call. But where does it stop? For example, do you orchestrate the workflow and then move on to something else without handing it over to human agents? Where's the lock? Where's the gate?
I think there's many parts to this question. Some of it happens before the conversation. Right. Most of it happens before the conversation. We've built one of the most sophisticated clinical triage and clinical escalation engines that exists in the industry. we want to make sure that at any given point in a conversation, there is a second agent that is running in the background, understanding what's being discussed. Are there signs, both explicit or implicit, that need an escalation to a human, that need a breakthrough and say, nope, AI can't handle this anymore. It needs to be transferred to an agent that works for a human agent that works for Infinitus, one that works for the customer, or it's an emergency, needs to go to 911.
That's correct.
Right? So there's many different layers of escalation that might be needed. How do we codify for each customer what those escalation protocols are? And how do we make sure this AI agent that is listening and making sure that there's clinical safety and triage happening does so the right way? Now, detection is step one. Triage is step two. You don't often have all the data needed, so you need to be able to ask a few clarifying questions.
Correct.
Having a phone call and someone starts wincing in pain. You don't know everything yet. You might need to pull back and say, hey, Mrs. Jones, I'm going to take a quick detour from our conversation. I just heard some pain. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Ask a couple of questions. Depending on the answer, triage it and escalate it appropriately. That's something that AI needs to do. It's not diagnosing. It's not prescribing. It is making sure that it gets to the right person with the right context. When it does that transfer, it fills in that human on what's happening.
And this is more of a theoretical question, and which is I'm very heavily involved in with a bunch of my clients on AI governance, helping them implement and think through the procedures at an enterprise level and how to use AI, even in the clinical settings, which actually directly impacts interpreting results for the patients. So, and the work is extensive.
Right.
So does that mean that now manufacturers not only looking to transfer the entire technology stack in-house, but also having to spend a lot of time and money into setting up AI governance?
Well, I think every company that we work with at this point has an AI governance group. Some are early in their journey, but almost everybody needs it because it's not just about patient support or the commercial team.
Correct.
Every part of pharma is being AI-fied, agentified. You have it, and making sure you safely bring in technology, you protect your core IP, and the AI systems are not going to cause more troubles than create benefits. That's core to any IT group, core to any CIO's office. So AI governance is a table stakes offering at this point, and most of them are getting really good at asking the right questions. 6 years ago, that wasn't the case. 6 years ago, people were asking us questions like, which models are you using? And everyone realizes that's an okay question to ask, but people change their models or fine tune their models, and there's a lot of nuance there. What really matters is what data goes in, what data comes out, who owns where the boundaries are.
Yes,
and it goes a lot deeper.
Yeah, and so is this manufacturer owned and operated AI governance structure, or do you inject your own expertise in when you're establishing AI technology stack?
I think every manufacturer has their AI governance teams that want to understand where the lines are. We have a lot of safety protocols on our side. We have the right ability to keep data separate. We have the ability to understand what goes into training our models, because we use some frontier models, we use some small models that we build. It's a cluster of a whole bunch of different pieces that come together into our platform that we have at Infinitus. But we have to be able to tell that story appropriately to the right stakeholders so they have comfort that their data will be protected, that the decisions being made are auditable. We've moved from a time where AI was a black box to one there's a little more translucence so that you can understand how those decisions are being made.
Right. And the reason I keep sort of asking about this is because every single conversation I've had with every single manufacturer, and to that extent, legacy hub, they have no idea where to start. I mean, and I'm talking
I think
about
the legacy hubs have no idea where to start.
Yeah,
I think the manufacturers very much do.
Probably, you're right.
Yeah.
And the reason I keep asking about AI governance from a manufacturer standpoint is that gap in knowledge that does exist. I mean, yes, there would be out of say 30% or 40% of manufacturers. I mean, big manufacturers, yes, they would have the right manpower and the skills to implement a very robust AI governance. And given that it's all self-regulation at this point anyway, your AI governance is going to be as big or as small as you want it to be, custom tailor-made. But there are organizations, there are pharmaceutical companies who are pretty much 15 people team. They are in clinical trials. How do you sort of expand your reach beyond that?
So a couple of things. I think it's important for us as a company to not only be good stewards of this technology, and we've really been proud of what we've been able to do as an early creator of AI for the pharma space, specifically on the commercial side, but also realize that we don't know everything, that we have to learn with the cutting edge, with the bleeding edge of this. And so we bring together groups of leaders so they can exchange notes and ideas and successes and failures behind closed doors with no press. And we learn from that as well. And in those groups, we bring some of our earliest adopters and some of our laggards, because it helps bridge the gap between these different groups. And sometimes all the questions are coming from a good place.
Yep.
Everyone wants to help the patient journey. No one wants to be fired for making a decision that they could have avoided. And sometimes you just have to have those connections. And so we help bridge some of those groups so they can have connections and folks can evangelize what's working in the industry.
Because that is a conversation that pivots. So if you have a solid AI governance, a solid roadmap or a strategy, it's an easy conversation to have from a technology implementation perspective because they feel safe and secure.
But social proof matters a lot as well.
Okay.
Right? So if you're a smaller company with 15 people, you might not have the world's leading experts on AI governance, even a phone call away. But if you know that 15 of your colleagues in the space have used a specific technology, then you can go, you know what? If this improves my patient journey, you can trust that a little bit. And the chances of it being wrong are way lower because it's been around for a while. One of our big differentiators, our edges, if you will, in the industry is we've been proving success for the last 7.5 years. It's not yesterday that we got up and said, hey, we can build an AI first hub. When we launched that AI first hub, we already are supporting a number of manufacturers on that whole suite of services. It's just talking about it in that way. That's correct.
So I want to pivot to how we measure. So I've been doing this exercise where I say, okay, I've sat through like hundreds and thousands of QBRs at this point. Yes, those are painful times.
AI can be pretty empathetic too. It's saying more than I'm sorry. It's saying, I'm sorry. I can only imagine.
Well, my AI sucks. I mean, it treats me like me like a slave rather than it being a slave. But anyway, but so yeah, so that's how you should treat your AI, by the way.
Because when the AI
becomes sentient,
I want them to know.
Well, I would have it in the context memory. But anyway, so the QBRs, kind of have created 4 states. So first is, we looked at, did this happen? Did this activity happen? Did we solve the AEs? Yeah. The second sort of lens that we looked at was, did this type call hit the SLA? Then the third was this output or outcome optimal for the patient? And fifth, which is I think where you are going and you're kind of just skipping a complete step, is predictive. What can we do right now to keep the patient back to therapy or on therapy at this moment?
I think the whole concept of QBRs, it's been around in business for a long time. I think it comes from a place where the companies that want to have QBRs, and we have them too. So I'm not, I want to be very clear about this. It comes from a place where you don't have your analytics, your reporting, and your insights built out. So you're constantly reporting. You shouldn't be reviewing your ongoing business once a quarter, right? We're aiming in a pretty short order to be able to say, you can see how your programs with us are doing in real time. The quarterly business review should be a strategic meeting.
Correct.
Where you can step back and go, hey, the core business is working well. The core offering is working well. Let's talk about the 1 or 2 things that are not working and figure out the root causes. And or if something went wrong over the last quarter, let's dissect that and understand how we're going to do things better. So it's truly a way of improving yourself. And the second thing, which is, we know we're far from utopia when it comes to the patient journey. What's the next dream that we want to dream together? That's what a QBR should be. You're getting some of the best minds from two companies together. You're getting some of the most expensive folks from two companies together. What's the point of looking at dashboards and looking at slides and charts that you could have done offline or done continuously and known of anomalies? That's what we need to redesign all of the vendors, all of the buyers in this world to rethink QBRs.
So are you looking to expand into REMS or PV and clinical trial space? Do you think this technology has any sort of adjacent market?
I think the idea of optimizing communication and optimizing the patient journey is a problem that's across all of healthcare. Getting the patient into a clinical trial, making sure they're educated, making sure you collect information and disseminate information the right way, AI can do that extremely well. Pharmacovigilance teams, there's hundreds, if not thousands of people that are constantly reviewing artifacts, typing up their summary of it, documenting it, submitting it places. AI can do that. These are people that didn't join healthcare to be data monkeys.
At one point, it's going to evolve into knowledge management systems. I mean, you spend millions of dollars in doing knowledge management systems for big manufacturers. We're looking to in-house their entire clinical trial journey. So they're literally retiring CROs right, left, and center. And imagine the amount of data and knowledge they have to sort of optimize it for a flow across, 15,000 people were involved in that journey to get that product out of the market.
Just like I talked about how our AI reps or AI MSLs are able to go support tier 2 and tier 3 HCPs. You can imagine in a clinical trials team where you find from your data sources that a provider in a specific geography has a patient with a certain set of characteristics, but you don't know which provider and you don't know which patient. You can now have AI reach out, not just over phone, over email, over fax, doesn't matter what the methodology is, and say, hey, if you have a patient that has these characteristics, this could really help change this disease state in a way that wasn't possible before. So we're really excited about the platform that we have. The AI First Hub is built on top of what we call Agent Studio, a way to build any and all kinds of communication agents. And we're having our customers and partners build all kinds of things on it. It's really fun to see.
That's exciting. Well, so I'm going to close with this. There is a view in the market in certain circles that the whole patient access program model is going to go away to a point where the technology is going to be integrated with the EMR EHR system. That is, I don't want to quote anyone, but that is said to be the reason McKesson and CoverMyMeds exited their businesses, their core business in specialty pharmacy, is they're predicting EMR EHRs being your technology stack that you already own and operate. All you're going to do is just push in through your EBI and EPAs and be done with it. So where does it lead what you are building? Does it is it only for the time duration when there's another technology stack that sort of moves on, the industry moves on to something else, or is that going to last for a long time?
I really like that viewpoint, right? Because as a patient, I want to be able to ask my doctor's office every question about everything. The problem with today is that my doctor's office doesn't have the resources to know about everything. Recently, we got a script for my daughter for a medication, and it was sent to the local Walgreens. My wife told me, "Hey, can you go pick it up?" And she said, "By the way, take your credit card because there's an $1,800 copay." I was like, "Wait, what? $1,800 copay? That's crazy." She's like, "Yeah, but we really need this medication." I said, "Okay, is there a cheaper alternative?" And she goes, "No, we really need this medication." And I kept walking. And then I called her and I said, "Hey, is there a copay assistance program?" And she's like, "Let me look it up." And she's like, "Oh, there is. Let me go coordinate." It was a 25-minute walk. By the time I got there, they'd applied the copay assistance card and everything, and I paid $125. That is a complete breakdown. I shouldn't have had to ask that question. My wife shouldn't have had to make 3 phone calls to coordinate all of that. The system should have done it. And that's the role that these programs play. They're tying the different loose ends because the EHR or EMR, I hope gets much better. I hope it can have more context, and I hope benefit verifications and prior auths become something that we say is a problem of yesterday, doesn't exist anymore. But someone has to be there to check in on the patients. Someone has to be there to answer questions, and someone has to be there to say, this is what's going to come next on your patient journey proactively rather than reactively. And no one's thinking about that yet. That's the role that we want to play. We want to be the thing that strings the patient journey together, and the ecosystem will make sure we have a role for that because it's desperately needed.
Then that is the ultimate goal. 10 years down the line, that's how we want to see a disconnected patient journey being the thing of the past. We want to make sure that we are empathetic to the patients who rely on the system to move ahead in their life, in their journey. No one wants to get sick, but they do. The healthcare system needs to be there for them. Well, thank you so much, Ankit. This was an interesting episode. Everyone from my audience, from operations to people in reimbursement market access, would love hearing your thoughts and your vision for this industry. And well, this is Ankur Jain at Hub Brief, and here's what I'm going to leave you with: outdated patient journeys are going to be a thing of the past. The argument is how you keep that conversation going. And Ankit is doing just that. And anyone who does that conversation is going to reinvent the US healthcare system. Thank you so much. And I will see you next time.
Thanks for having me.
It was great. Outdated hub operating systems and lack of connectivity is hopefully over. Everybody knows how it ends. Whoever explores that conversation changes this industry and for better. This is the Hub Brief. I'm Ankit Jain.